Sarah Mitchell had dreamed of her wedding day since she was a little girl, but she never imagined it would become the most emotionally charged moment of her life, or that it would teach an entire congregation about the true meaning of love and acceptance. The accident had happened 3 years before her wedding day. Sarah was 25, working as a physical therapist at a children's hospital, when a distracted driver ran a red light and struck her car broadside. The impact shattered her left femur and damaged the nerves in her leg. After 6 surgeries and 18 months of grueling rehabilitation, doctors told her she'd made remarkable progress, but the limp would be permanent. Some days were better than others. On good days, it was barely noticeable. On bad days, her leg dragged slightly, and she needed a cane. Sarah had been devastated at first, mourning not just the physical abilities she'd lost but also the life she'd imagined for herself. She wondered if anyone would ever see past her disability, if she'd ever feel beautiful again, if her wedding day, if it ever came, would be marred by her inability to walk gracefully down an aisle. Then she met David Chen at a coffee shop near the hospital. He was a high school history teacher grading papers at a corner table when Sarah stumbled slightly while carrying her latte. Papers went flying, coffee splashed, and Sarah wanted to disappear into the floor from embarrassment. But David just laughed warmly, helped her to a chair, and insisted on buying her another coffee. They talked for 3 hours that day. He never once looked at her leg with pity or discomfort. He looked into her eyes and saw her. Their relationship bloomed naturally. David loved Sarah's sharp wit, her compassion for her young patients, her determination to live fully despite her challenges. He loved the way she sang off-key in the car and her inexplicable devotion to terrible reality TV shows. Sarah loved David's patience, his infectious laugh, the way he believed in his students even when they didn't believe in themselves. She loved that he never treated her like she was fragile or broken. When David proposed on a beach at sunset, going down on one knee in the sand while Sarah stood above him for once without any self-consciousness, she said yes through happy tears. Planning the wedding became a joy, though Sarah worried constantly about the walk down the aisle. Her father would be beside her, supporting her arm, but it was still a long distance. She practiced in her apartment, timing her steps, building her strength. She found the perfect dress, elegant lace with a flowing skirt that would help camouflage any unevenness in her gait. The wedding day arrived in early autumn, with golden light filtering through the old church's stained glass windows. The building was packed with nearly 200 guests, family, friends, colleagues, David's former students. Sarah's bridesmaids fussed over her in the dressing room, adjusting her veil and assuring her she looked radiant. Her father squeezed her hand and told her how proud he was of the woman she'd become. But Sarah hadn't counted on the extra stress making her leg worse. The morning had been hectic, full of last-minute details and photographs. She'd been on her feet for hours. By the time the music began and the doors opened for her entrance, her leg was aching badly, and she could feel it was going to be one of her difficult days. The first few steps down the aisle went reasonably well. Sarah held her father's arm tightly, focusing on David's face at the altar. He was beaming at her with such pure love that her heart soared. But halfway down the aisle, her leg buckled slightly, causing her to stumble. She caught herself, but her gait became more pronounced, her limp more obvious. In the silent church, filled only with the soft music, she could hear the whisper of her dress against the carpet, the slight drag of her foot. Then she heard the whispers. At first, she thought she'd imagined it. But as she continued walking, she heard hushed voices, saw heads turning not in admiration but in something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or worse. One voice, belonging to someone she couldn't identify, carried just loud enough for her to hear, "Oh my God, is she limping?" Another whispered back, "How awkward. Poor thing can't even walk properly." A third voice, dripping with false sympathy, "They should have had her use a wheelchair. This is painful to watch." From somewhere in the middle of the congregation, she heard a stifled laugh. Someone was actually laughing. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Her worst nightmare was unfolding. All the months of worry, all the practice, all the work to feel beautiful and confident on this day, it was crumbling around her. She felt exposed, humiliated, reduced to nothing more than her disability in what should have been her most triumphant moment. Her steps faltered more severely. Her father whispered encouragingly, "You're doing great, sweetheart. We're almost there, but his words couldn't penetrate the shame that was flooding through her. She looked up at David and saw that he'd heard the whispers too. His expression had changed from joy to something fierce and protective. He'd taken a step forward from his position at the altar, his hands clenched at his sides. Sarah was still 20 feet away when she stumbled again, this time more severely. Her legs simply wouldn't cooperate anymore. The combination of physical strain and emotional distress was too much. She stopped walking entirely, frozen in place in the middle of the aisle, tears streaming down her face. The whispers grew louder. She heard someone say, "This is a disaster." That's when David moved. He didn't hesitate for even a second. While the officiant looked on in surprise and the congregation murmured in confusion, David strode down the aisle toward his bride. His face was set with determination and radiating love. He reached Sarah in seconds, and without saying a word, he swept her up into his arms, one arm under her knees, one supporting her back, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. The church fell completely silent. Sarah gasped, instinctively wrapping her arms around David's neck. "David, what are you?" "I've got you," he said simply, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll always have you." Then he carried her the rest of the way down the aisle. With Sarah cradled against his chest, David walked steadily toward the altar, his eyes forward, his purpose clear. Sarah buried her face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by a tangle of emotions: embarrassment, love, gratitude, relief. She could feel the strength in his arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He wasn't struggling or straining. He carried her as if it was the most natural thing in the world, as if this was exactly what he'd always meant to do. When they reached the altar, David gently set Sarah on her feet, keeping one arm around her waist to steady her. Then he turned to face the congregation. The silence was absolute. Every eye was on them. David's voice rang out clearly. "Before we begin, I have something to say." The officiant stepped back, yielding the floor. Sarah tried to tug David's sleeve, embarrassed that he was making a scene, but he took her hand firmly and continued. 3 years ago, Sarah was hurt in an accident that changed her life. She has worked harder than anyone I know to recover, to adapt, to continue living fully and helping others. She's stronger and braver than most people will ever be. The fact that she walks differently than you doesn't make her less. It makes her remarkable. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. And if any of you think that a limp diminishes her beauty, her worth, or her ability to be an incredible wife, then you fundamentally don't understand what love is. He turned to Sarah, his eyes soft now. "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Not despite your challenges, not even because of them. Just because you're you. And if carrying you every day for the rest of our lives is what it takes for you to know how cherished you are, then that's what I'll do." The church was still silent, but Sarah saw people wiping their eyes. Her own tears were flowing freely, but they were different now. Tears of being truly seen, truly loved, truly accepted. David turned back to the congregation one last time. Marriage isn't about perfect people walking smoothly through life. It's about two imperfect people choosing each other, holding each other up, carrying each other when necessary. That's what I'm promising today. That's what love is. He nodded to the officiant. "We can begin now." What followed was the most emotional wedding ceremony anyone in that church had ever witnessed. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was respectful and complete. When David and Sarah exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the building. Sarah's voice shook but remained clear as she promised to love David with everything she had. David's voice was strong and certain as he promised to be her partner, her support, her champion in all things. When they were pronounced husband and wife and shared their first kiss as a married couple, the congregation erupted in applause that was thunderous and sustained. People stood, cheering, some openly crying. The same mouths that had whispered mockery were now celebrating love in its truest form. As Sarah and David walked back down the aisle together, Sarah leaning on David's arm but walking on her own 2 feet, people reached out to touch their hands, offering congratulations and apologies. The woman who had laughed stopped them, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I'm so sorry. Forgive me. You've taught me something important today." At the reception, David's impromptu speech was all anyone could talk about. Multiple guests approached Sarah to apologize for their whispers, their judgments, their failure to see what truly mattered. Sarah accepted their apologies with grace, though she stayed close to David's side all evening, drawing strength from his presence. During their first dance, David held Sarah close as they swayed to their song. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, "for seeing me, for defending me, for carrying me." "Always," David replied, kissing her forehead. "In every way that matters, we'll carry each other." Years later, when people asked about their wedding day, David and Sarah would smile and say it wasn't at all what they'd planned. It was better. Because it had stripped away all pretense and revealed what was real. The moment when David carried Sarah down that aisle became a defining memory not just of their wedding but of their entire relationship. A physical manifestation of the emotional truth they'd already known. Love means choosing each other. Love means support when you falter. Love means carrying and being carried in turn. Their wedding video went viral when a guest posted it online, and David's impromptu speech inspired countless people facing their own challenges. But for Sarah and David, the attention was secondary to the deeper truth they discovered. That vulnerability met with unwavering acceptance is the foundation of the strongest bonds. Sarah never did walk perfectly, and there were still hard days when her leg ached and her spirit sometimes sagged. But she never again felt alone in her struggle. And she never forgot the feeling of being lifted up, held close, and carried forward by someone who saw all of her, limitations included, and chose to love her anyway. That's what carried them both through everything that followed.